Here.
So I'm now pressing the record button, and we are being recorded. I want to officially welcome Rabbi Spalter. Thank you very much for being here with us today and giving us this tour of the Jewish community of Costa Rica. Before we get into it, I've had some people ask me if and how you might be related to one of our wonderful community members, prominent community members, the Wolf family, Mrs. Libby Wolf, who is maiden name is Spalter. Are you related?
Yes, Libby is my sister, actually.
Oh, fantastic!
So Rabbi Wolf is my brother-in-law. That Rabbi Yitzchak Wolf and Rabbi Aaron Wolf, I believe, who is connected to the organization, is Amachitim.
He is the director.
Yes.
I'm going to put the spotlight on you so we can all see you better. And whenever you're ready, please go right ahead.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for inviting me to meet all of these beautiful people and be able to share some time, a few minutes with you. And it's a great pleasure and honor for me. I have visited Chicago many times, as I just mentioned, that I have very dear family there. I actually have some daughters that had studied in Chicago, in the high school of Chicago. So I know the community of Chicago pretty well, and I feel very much connected. And I have a great amount of gratitude to the community for the education of my own children. As I'm sure you were told by the rabbi, I have lived in Costa Rica for the last 32 years. We were sent here on Shlichus by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in July of 1989. And Costa Rica is a community, just to give a little, we came here, we didn't have any children at the time. Today we had 8 children that were born here in Costa Rica, and a few of them were married here in Costa Rica. And so we go back quite a few years over here. We have already a second and third generation here in Costa Rica now. We came here in July, to be precise, Gimel Tammuz, the 3rd of Tammuz, in Tafshin Mem Tes, 1989. And since then, we've been here. This is a community. The first time I actually came to visit was in March of 1989. We came to meet some community members and to see how we could establish our mission here, our work here, our Chabad center over here in Costa Rica. So we came to meet a few prominent members of the community. And when I came back to the United States, to New York from Costa Rica, I must say, in 1989, Costa Rica was not so well known as it is today. And I actually, when I was approached and asked if I would move to Costa Rica, I said, where? I had never heard of the place. But I said, sure, if that's what's needed at the time, of course, that's where I'll go. And well, I don't regret it at all. It's a beautiful country and a great country and a great community. And I thank God that I had the merit to be able to come here and come on Shlichus of the Lubavitcher Rebbe to be able to serve this beautiful community. When I came back from my first visit in March, I was interviewed by a Jewish newspaper. And they asked me, what did you find in Costa Rica? And what are you planning to do there? So the truth is that I found a beautiful, vibrant community in the sense that they had an incredible infrastructure. There was a beautiful shul, and there was a school, and they had a club, a Jewish club where people would go visit, especially on Sundays. And they would go there with all kind of sports activities and clubs and swimming pools, and a beautiful, beautiful Jewish club. And obviously they had a cemetery and everything that a Jewish community really needs, they had. It was a very solid infrastructure. What they didn't have was much Jewish knowledge. They didn't have a rabbi here most of the years that they had a community. I'll soon describe what the community, how long the community was established. But they didn't have any kind of Jewish knowledge. They had a Jewish school, but it was more of it was a Jewish school which they taught some Judaism. They taught the children how to read. They taught a lot of Zionism, but they didn't really have. It wasn't like, let's say, like a school which taught that much Judaism. They taught a little bit of tradition, but not much Judaism. The children grew up here some were able to speak Hebrew, and they were able to pray and read from a Siddur, but they didn't really know much of Judaism. There's a tremendous ignorance here when it came to the actual Judaism. So what I said was, at the time, I responded to this newspaper, that I found a beautiful community with a Jewish infrastructure, and I'm going to try to put in a soul. I'm going to try to come and give them a soul. It's a beautiful body that they have. I'll try to bring a soul into this beautiful body through study, through classes, through lectures, and just give a little bit more knowledge of Judaism, the soul of Judaism. And we set out to do that. The Jewish community originally in Costa Rica is a Polish community, which in the late 20s, early 30s, some people moving here from Poland, a shtetl, it's a small town. It's called Żelechów. This town of Żelechów it was a city. Actually, it wasn't that small, but they had some great rabbis in the city of Żelechów in the past. There's a famous rabbi, Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, which he was the rabbi of the city of Żelechów for a while. That's going back over 200, 250 years. And like this, they had some very, very important rabbis in the city of Żelechów, although it wasn't a very large city. But it was a very Jewish city, a Hasidic city. And there were some members of this community that moved to Costa Rica, escaping the persecution or the poverty of Poland at the time. And they were looking to come to America. They weren't looking necessarily for Costa Rica, but wherever they were able to get in, that's where they landed. And they came to Costa Rica because Stigl let them in, and they came here. And they started, the first thing, and obviously they dedicated themselves to make a living, to be able to establish themselves. But at the same time, pretty soon after, they opened up a little shul, somebody in his house originally. And little by little, they started developing this community. They brought family members and friends. And this is all before the war. Before the war, they already had a shul over here. They had a pretty ashtiku community, as they say, ashtiku kehila. When the war broke out, after the war, I would say a lot of people, they brought their friends and family that were survivors. They brought many survivors over here. And so the community was established by actually a community which was before the war, but many other survivors came after the war to settle here in Costa Rica. And it became a pretty strong community. You opened up a Jewish school probably in the 60s. They opened up their first Jewish school. I think it was in 16, maybe 16, the early 60s. And before that, they had what they called a Rebbe, which was a Malamed. He was a teacher. He came to teach the children. They went to public schools, but he would give them some Jewish instruction in the evenings or in the afternoons, and he would teach them to read. They would prepare them for bar mitzvah, but it wasn't much. It wasn't much, but still they learned how to read. Some of the children that prepared themselves for bar mitzvah with this Rebbe. But in the early 60s, they already opened up a school, and it was called the school Dr. Chaim Weitzman. And this was a school which obviously, once they had a school, the children, most of the children studied in the school. There was no rabbi. All of these years, there was no rabbi. But they had a person who was a chazan, a very nice chazan, and he would do all the weddings, and he ran the community, the spiritual side of the community. He himself was one of the first immigrants that came to Costa Rica, and he became a very wealthy businessman, and he was also very nice about tefillah. He was a chazan, so he also ran the spiritual side of the community. So he wasn't a rabbi. He didn't know that much, but nevertheless, he did give the community whatever he was able to, and he held the community in a very strong way with no intermarriage. There was absolutely almost zero intermarriage. When I came in 1989, there was very little intermarriage in this community. So going back, that's many years that they held on to this community with a statement. They kept amongst themselves. They married amongst themselves, although they were going to the public schools and they were going to the universities and so on and so forth. And they didn't have that much Jewish. There weren't. I would say that when I came to Costa Rica, there were maybe 3 observant Jews living in Costa Rica. 3. When I say observant, I shouldn't use that word. I mean 3 that were fully observant, Shomer Shabbos, and so on. There were literally 3 Jews then. And then there was two teachers that were teaching in the school at the time. So they brought from Israel 2 teachers, and they were also observant. They were Shomer Shabbos. There were some people that were keeping kosher still, but they came from Poland. They were still keeping kosher. Some older people, but it was a very traditional community. Even that they wanted to hold on to their Yiddishkeit, they wanted to hold on to the Jewish traditions and to the community. So it was a very strong community, but very little knowledge. It was tremendous ignorance in Judaism. That's what it was. So when we came here, we set out to start teaching, to give that. We immediately started giving many classes, and people were hungry. We started supplying kosher at the time. We started a shkita over here, and that people should be able to start keeping kosher. There was somebody here that was doing a little bit shkita before we came, but it was in a very poor situation. The meat wasn't good. It wasn't presented well. It wasn't enough ever from anything. And so those that felt that they had to do it, so they still kept kosher to the best that they were able to buying this, but most people weren't interested in that, and it was a difficult situation to keep kosher. So we put in a lot of effort to build up a very strong kosher possibilities over here in Costa Rica. I could just say that when we started doing our shkita, which took over the shkita for the community at that time, I was bringing in a sheikhet every 5 months. And at the time, we would do shkita for we did about 1,500 chickens, or we did maybe 30 animals, and that lasted us for 5 months. So there weren't many people eating kosher at the time. Today, there are 2 shkitas over here, and today, every month, there's a shkita for about 200 animals and about 8,000 chickens per month. And there are not anymore the people that came from Poland. They're not here anymore. It's all young people that are keeping kosher and they're observing kosher. This is only kosher. Obviously, there's much more. We probably have today about 70, 80 families who are keeping Shabbos and keeping all of Judaism fully observant. So it became very vibrant. It became today a very vibrant Jewish community. Let me get back to the origins of the community. There is a theory that the community of Costa Rica, the original settlers of Costa Rica was not an inhabited place 500 years ago. And when Columbus came to America, one of his landings was in Costa Rica. And that he gave it the name Costa Rica, which means the rich coast. He thought that there was a lot of gold here. And he penned the name Costa Rica for this country. But there were no people living here. It was not an inhabited place. To the extent that there were some Indians, the Native Americans living in the outskirts of the country, but most of the country there's really nobody here. And the theory is that the Jews came to settle. Some Jews came along with him. They came to settle in Costa Rica because it was far away from the Inquisition. The Inquisition at the time was functioning, the Spanish Inquisition, as we know, who controlled all of these territories. All these territories were under their rule. And they had set up the Spanish Inquisition in places like Ecuador, even in Mexico, but they were far away from Costa Rica. So nobody lived here, and they didn't set it up here. So people lived here, and it's interesting. There are books written on this theory that the first inhabitants of Costa Rica were Jewish. Just to give a little context to that, we had a Jewish ambassador, who was the president of the Friends of Lubavitch of Costa Rica. He became the ambassador from Costa Rica to the US. This was probably 20 something years ago, about 20 years ago. And he convinced the American Jewish Committee to come and do their annual convention here in Costa Rica. Because Costa Rica was always so supportive of Israel, it was the only embassy that all of the years had the embassy in Jerusalem. The embassy of Costa Rica was in Jerusalem since 1982. They removed it a few years ago, but we'll get back to that. In 1982, the one that became president, Monge, his name was Luis Alberto Monge. Prior to that, he was the Costa Rican ambassador to Israel. the first thing he did as a president, the day that he was inaugurated, was he signed a bill to move the embassy to Jerusalem, to Yerushalayim. And he was actually married to a Jewish woman at the time, but it wasn't her influence as much as his own. He was a person that he believed very much in human rights, and he fought for that, and he went a lot. And he believed that this was the right thing to do. The Jews had their rights to have to decide where their capital was, and he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. So, and in general, they were very supportive of Israel. The UN, they always voted with Israel, and they were supportive of the Jewish community. So this ambassador, the ambassador Jaime Darrenblum, he had asked the American Jewish community at the time that they should do their annual convention in Costa Rica, showing appreciation and thanks to the country for that, and they did. And the night that there was a dinner that the president made in the presidential house, it's like the White House in the U.S. The presidential house. He gave a dinner for this American community, along with some members, prominent members of the Jewish community of Costa Rica. I was present at this dinner. And unfortunately, the president himself wasn't able to be there because his brother was dying in the hospital that night. Actually, middle of the dinner, we got the sad news that his brother died, passed away. So he sent the vice president, to address this dinner. Her name was Fischl. Her grandfather was actually Jewish, a Jew from Poland. Her father was Jewish, but her mother wasn't Jewish. And she was the vice president of the country at the time. And she spoke and she said something incredible. You have to remember that the press was there, and it was a very big to do in the country. The American Jewish Committee came to do their annual convention. It was very crucial. It was a very important event in the country. And she said that the reason why Costa Rica is so much more developed than the rest of the countries around us is because the original settlers and those that built this country were Jewish. She said it straight out. It was an incredible thing for her to say that. Politically, in America, it would probably be considered politically incorrect to say something like that. But nevertheless, she said it right there in front of the press, and it was interesting. In any case, I could just say that I get requests on a daily basis, emails and calls from Costa Ricans that they say that they're Saraditas, that they have the Jewish heritage, and they want to go back to their Jewish heritage. They come from Jews. They have no proof for it. They have no way of showing that because we're going back hundreds of years, but there's a tremendous amount of people that want to convert to Judaism here in Costa Rica. And some of them even have customs. Many of them have customs. They say that from in the family, they have these customs that Friday, late afternoon, the mothers, they go in hiding somewhere in a closed room to go and light some candles. And they have other kind of customs like that, which they brought. The Marranos, we know, used to do that. They had to go in hiding, and they had to go light the Shabbos candles. And other customs like that, they have generations in the family that they were doing. So I do believe that there's definitely a lot of Jewish love here in the country, from the Marranos that came at a settle from them. So it's a very interesting aspect. But there's nothing left from that. They all opened churches instead of shuls. Then obviously they couldn't open shuls then, at least not openly, because the Inquisition they were under Spanish rule, then they couldn't do any of that. But they found in the original churches of Costa Rica, the Catholic churches, it's dominantly a Catholic country, Costa Rica, and the Catholic churches, the original ones that they opened then, they were all facing Jerusalem, they're all facing east, all of them. And then they found some Jewish artifacts in basements and so on, so there's interesting theories why they believe that it's so. There are many Jewish names that the Marranos had from those days in Costa Rica. In any case, but that's all in the past. There was no Jewish community in Costa Rica, established Jewish community, until the early 30s. And there is actually a foreigners cemetery here in Costa Rica, which I went to visit, and they have Jewish tombstones. They have matzevos over there with Jewish wording and Jews. There was no Jewish cemetery, so some Jews that lived there in the past, some Sephardic Jews, not from those original ones, but later on, some Sephardic Jews came there from Curacao and different places, and so they had some Jews. The Jews were buried in this cemetery, which was called for extranjeros, which means for foreigners, because it wasn't a religious cemetery, so the Jews chose to be buried over there. In any case, the community today has approximately 3,500 to 4,000 Jews living mainly in the capital, San Jose, and that's where we are. We are in a city called Escazú, suburb of San Jose. It's in the province of San Jose, and that's a suburb of the city of San Jose. And this is where where this original community in 1929 established themselves in 1930, the early 30s. And this is where the majority of the community is. We have today, Chabad today in Costa Rica we have a shul, and we have a mikvahs, and we have a whole kosher infrastructure. We have some restaurants today, you get some kosher food. And when we came to Costa Rica, you went into a supermarket, you couldn't find anything kosher. But I started speaking to the major supermarkets here. I said, you're importing foods, import this and that, things that have the kosher symbols on them. You're anyways importing. And they started doing that. And today you can walk into Costa Rica supermarkets and find almost anything you need. Obviously not dairy and not meat, even dairy, yes, you find some. But you can find many things that you need. You can find today in Costa Rica, the regular supermarkets that come imported from the US that are kosher. But besides that, we opened up a whole kosher infrastructure in Costa Rica to be able to have what people need here locally, and so today it's easy to keep kosher, and today many people keep Shabbos, and we have today's two beautiful mikvahs in Costa Rica, and so on and so forth. Anything that a Jewish community would need, we have that today in Costa Rica in that aspect. Chabad opened up a school, and Chabad opened up a shul, and we have our school, we have different. But the main thing that we have here is that we give service to the entire community in whatever they need, whether in studying Judaism, whatever they need. I remember when we came originally to Costa Rica, people would say, over here you can't really live Jewish. You want to be Jewish, you have to go to Miami, which is the closest Jewish place to Costa Rica. You have to go to New York, you have to go to Israel, you have to go to large Jewish communities, Chicago, such kind of cities that have large Jewish infrastructures. We decided when we came here with my wife that we were going to eliminate that. Nobody's going to say that they cannot be Jewish in Costa Rica. That's not going to exist. We immediately started a Judaica when we came here. Whoever needed a Kiddush cup, whoever needed a candelabras for Shabbos, whatever else they may need, a Hanukkah menorah, they will be able to get it in Costa Rica, and for the same price that they will pay for it in Miami. Thank God we've succeeded in that. And we started over here kosher and everything else. And with the time, things broke in. And today, nobody will say anymore, you cannot be Jewish in Costa Rica. That's non-existent, thank God. We had over here a Jewish vice president, 3 Jewish vice presidents for that matter, of the country. We had one of them, Louis Lieberman, which was more or less the same time that Joe Lieberman was running for vice president in the US. We actually got a Louis Lieberman here in Costa Rica as our vice president. The Jewish community was always very influential, although there were very few Jews that were very influential in the country, in all aspects of the country, whether in politics, whether in the arts, in the press, in every aspect of the country. The Jewish community was very, very active, very influential. To the extent, I remember once I got a visit from a company, the largest company in the country. It was a chain of supermarkets. And they were opening a supermarket in the Jewish community, and they came to visit me. And they brought the whole executive committee of this, and the owners came to visit me. Eventually, they were bought up by Walmart. But at the time, they were a Costa Rican-owned company. And they said that they want to sell kosher meat in their supermarket. I asked them why. So because they're opening a supermarket, a new one here in the community, next to the community. They want to bring in the Jewish customers. It's okay, very interesting. And I said, how many Jews live in Costa? Like I just want, as we were speaking, I wanted to get an idea of what they thought. I said, how many Jews live in Costa Rica? 100,000. Those are the answers. These are the owners of the largest companies in Costa Rica. They thought there were about 100,000 Jews living here. One person said 250,000 Jews living here. I mean, they said that Jewish community was so vibrant and so, and so influential in the country that people thought there were hundreds of thousands of Jews living here. It's a very small country. Costa Rica has maybe 4 to 5 million people today. And they thought that there were so many Jews. The truth is that there were only a few thousand Jews. I did not tell them that, but that was the truth. I just want to give you, I'm going to show you a magazine. It's a shame I didn't send it before. I just thought of it now as we were speaking. This magazine was what you would call the Time magazine of Central America. It was the most influential magazine in Central America then, called Rumbo. And this magazine is from December 20th, 1994. I hold it here and I keep it in my office because it's a very, very important magazine. I'm going to try to show you the picture. Could you see it well? Could you see it?
Yes, we can see it, yes.
Okay, so you see there's a large Magen David. It's blue and white. And in red writing, it says in the center of the Magen David, it says Jewish power. Jewish power. And you have 5 pictures, insets in the bottom of that. Could you see that?
Yes, we can see the pictures.
Okay. So let me tell you who these 5 people are. You had this, he was a banker, one of the most important bankers in Costa Rica is one. The next one was a candidate for the president, a Jew who was running for president at the time. You have a woman that was actually at the time vice president, a Jewish woman by the name of Rebecca Greenspan. I'm going to go back. The banker that I mentioned originally, his name is Louis Lieberman, who later became the vice president of the country years later. The second one that was running for president, his name is Louis Fishman. Just to give you a little idea who this Louis Fishman is, Louis Fishman, at the Six-Day War, he was a young guy, and he went with a group of friends to Israel to fight in the war and support Israel. This is this Louis Fishman. He later came back to Costa Rica and he was running for president. He became a vice president later on. He was a minister many years. His wife was a minister, the minister of culture. When we came to Costa Rica, she was the minister of culture, and I had asked her at the time, I wanted to put the Hanukkah menorah, giant Hanukkah menorah, in a very public area, which was it was in a park, actually, a government-owned park. And I wanted it to be on government property to be able to show that the government of Costa Rica supports freedom of religion. And she was the minister at the time, and she gave me the permission. Then today, I don't have a picture of it, it's a shame, but today, this menorah that we put then became a monument in Costa Rica. It's there all year. It's a monument, official monument in Costa Rica. I'm just gonna give it the first 2 years that I put up the menorah, after Hanukkah, I would take it down. One day I decided, what do I have to take it down for? Let me leave it up there. If they tell me that they call me and tell me to take it down, I'll take it down. But if they don't, let there be a menorah standing in Costa Rica all year. Nobody ever bothered me. It stood there for a couple of years. And then President Clinton was coming to visit to Costa Rica. And one of the main events was at the museum, at the art museum. And the menorah was right on the side, or in front on the side of this art museum, facing the main street, the main street, in any case, facing this menorah. So I get a call from the security of Costa Rica that you must take down the menorah because of security. The president of Costa Rica is coming, you have to take it up, but you can put it up right after his visit. So I asked them, is this by the order of the US security or it's the Costa Rican security? I suspected that the US security did not ask for that because the US security is not going to ask to take down a religious symbol. I couldn't believe that would happen. So they told me you have to take it down. I took a risk. I know the country. By then I knew the country pretty well. And I said, you know what? I decided I'm not taking it down. Let it be there. Let the whole world, obviously this visit of the president is going to be broadcast to the world. Let them see that Costa Rica is a free country, that we could have a menorah up there in public all year. This wasn't Hanukkah. So I decided I was going to leave the menorah there. And they told me they would take it down if I didn't. But I knew that they would not do that. They were too lazy to do that. So I said, I'm going to leave the menorah there. And it was interesting that the reports around the world and CNN and all of the world press The first thing they showed, they zoomed into the menorah, and then they zoomed out and they went to the art museum and they did the rest of the, so it came out very nice for Costa Rica, actually. They showed in the world that Costa Rica is a very open, a very tolerant country in that way. It was also a big Kiddush Hashem to see that, Judaism lives in Costa Rica. So this was Louis Fishman's wife. She was the minister at the time. Then we have Rebecca Greenspan, who was the vice president at the time. Then we have Jaime Darnblum, who he was very important international lawyer, but more important to this magazine was that he was he was in the media too. And he was a very important media person in the media in Costa Rica. He was a diplomat who he later became the ambassador to the US, the Costa Rican ambassador to the US. And then the fifth one was the Minister of Health at the time. This article, there was an article with a spread for about 10 pages in this magazine. And what they write is the reality of the Jewish community of Costa Rica, how many Jews really live here, the major businesses that they own. It was a very anti-Semitic article. It was because this president was running, this Jew was running for president. So they printed this terrible anti-Semitic article. There was nothing which was not true. They just wrote the whole truth. And they wanted it to be out there that they only have 3,500 Jews, and look at these businesses they own, and look at the influence they have in the country. It was a very terrible, and as I said, Jewish power right there in the center of that Magen David. So it was a scary thing. This came out, I believe, on Wednesday or on Thursday. Thursday morning, the president of the country wrote a letter to the newspaper, published a letter in the La Nación, in the newspaper, with a strong condemnation of this article and of the whole magazine. That Friday night, the entire cabinet and Supreme Court came to show solidarity for the Jewish community. And that magazine never published another issue. That magazine closed down. It was the most important magazine in the country and in Central America, and they never published another issue. So there was tremendous support for Costa Rica for the Jewish community here, and they were very influential, really. And I must say that it was not the Jews that came out against this magazine. It was the Costa Rican government well, we don't have the same level of support today like we had back then. It was a president who he had this dream that he was going to become the Secretary General of the UN. He had won the Nobel Peace Prize, a president by the name of Oscar Arias, and he was president when I came to Costa Rica, actually, but later became president again the second time, many years later. And he wanted to become the Secretary General of the UN. He understood that if he's going to have the embassy in Jerusalem, he's not going to get any support from the Arab and from African nations and all these lovers of Israel in the UN. So he campaigned that he was going to remove the embassy, and he did. He removed the embassy from Jerusalem. It was very painful because the ambassador at the time to Israel was a Jewish woman, and she called me up at the time. She says, "What do I do? Do I resign? I don't want to be the one to have to move out of Jerusalem, to move the embassy out of Jerusalem." It's very painful. So, but I told her what I felt at the time, and thank God it worked out to the best for her. In any case, I just want to say this. I wanted to mention this to show that it truly was. I mean, Costa Rica is a country that really did. Until today, there's a tremendous support for the country. Don't know if this is too interesting, but when this president that was going to remove the embassy from Jerusalem became president already, and his brother was what they call in America would be considered the Speaker of the House. Over here, it's called the President of the Congress. So the brother of this president was the president of the Congress, and between his becoming president, before he moved the embassy, there was an Israeli company that came and invested a huge investment in Costa Rica. They were going to build a whole city in Costa Rica, and they called me and asked me if I could come to the putting the foundation stone, when they're going to be putting the foundation stone, if I could come there and do this. So originally I didn't want to. It was an hour and a half drive from San Jose, and I had other things going on that Sunday. But later I said, you know what? It's an important event in the country. Let me go do it. I went there, lo and behold, the brother of the president of the Congress is there. There are many politicians there. The Israeli ambassador was there. There were congressmen there. The press was there. It was a big event because it was a very huge, a very large investment. There was going to be building a whole city. So when I arrived, so we stood around the hall, and this Mr. Arias was standing to my right. There was another minister standing to my left, and it was around the hall with the investors from Israel. It was a very nice representation of the business, political people in Costa Rica. The press was there. So I said, you know what, I'm going to use this to send a message to the president, to his brother, and in the press. So I took the microphone, and before I said the blessings, before we dropped the stone into the hole, I said that I was once visited by, in Spanish, it's a farmer, a campesino, which means a simple Costa Rican. So the person, a campesino, is a very loving way, a term that they use here in Costa Rica to say a simple, a humble person in Costa Rica. Campesino is like people living out in the outskirts. We have to remember, that was Costa Rica. Therefore, it was a way of saying like the original Costa Rica. So I said there was a campesino that told me that he sees the fulfillment of the blessing, the biblical blessing where God blessed Abraham, and he told him that those that bless you will be blessed. This campesino tells me that he sees the fulfillment of the blessing here in Costa Rica, because Costa Rica was always good to the Jews, and it was always good. It was good to Israel. And through that, and we see that there is no, there were many hurricanes in South America, Central America, destroyed many countries. It never touched Costa Rica. There was political strife, with all the different guerrillas fights and all the different fights going on over here. Costa Rica was never touched. Costa Rica is a democracy, really about 140-year democracy. There's hunger. Costa Rica has no hunger. It's a good country. It's a blessed country. And he said, I see the fulfillment of this biblical blessing. And I concluded by saying, we see now that there's this relationship between Israel and Costa Rica continues, and the blessing will continue to flow. I just want to send a message to the president in front of the country, because the press was there, that don't mess up the blessings that you have. Don't remove that embassy. I didn't say blatantly, obviously. I said that this relationship continues and the blessings will continue to flow. And that was it. And then I said a few verses of Tehillim, and we dropped the stone in. It was an event. The president later, I met the president later. They weren't that satisfied with that message, although he did remove the embassy, but there's a lot of love and respect today still for Israel and for the Jewish community. Let me, I'm going to share a story. Well, there are many stories. I mean, as I said in the beginning, today, there's a lot more Judaism going on over here. There's a tremendous amount of people that are observing Judaism and that send their children, they'll send away children to yeshivas, to study yeshivas abroad in the US or in Costa or in Israel. And in general, there's much more Judaism, Jewish activity and Judaism going on today in Costa Rica. There are a few shuls. We ourselves in Costa Rica today, there are also many Israeli young people that after the army, they go toward the world to relieve themselves from the tension the built-up tension in the Israeli army. And one of the destinations that they come to is Central and South America. And Costa Rica also, they come here. It's a beautiful natural country. There's a lot of tourism here. The greatest industry here is tourism, actually. And so they come here also. So we have two Chabad centers, two shuls by two beach towns. We are in the center of the country. We're more for the community of Costa Rica. Our Chabad, one of the main Chabad. But we also have two shuls running in separate places by two beach towns where Israelis live. Actually, some came to live, and many tourists come over there. We have that running over there. I just want to mention a story that happened many years ago, in the beginning, close to the beginning that we started the Shechita here. There was one of these animal rights organizations that decided that they wanted to become popular here in Costa Rica. Nobody thought about them, nobody knew them, and nobody had anything to do with them. So I sent the sheikhet to do the shchita once, and he comes to the door, they don't let him in. They don't let him in. I said, what happened? She says, they say that they received a letter from this animal rights organization that if they're going to continue the shchita, the Jewish slaughtering, they're going to come out with they're going to come out with public announcements against them in the press. They're going to badmouth them. The owner of this slaughterhouse was a very dear friend of the president of the Friends of Lubavitch of Costa Rica. As I mentioned before, his name is Jaime Darwin, who became the ambassador to the US. This owner of this slaughterhouse was a very dear friend of his. And this owner later became president of Costa Rica, and he sent Jaime Darwin to become ambassador of the US. At the time, he was an important politician, and he owned this slaughterhouse. So I called up this Jaime Darwin. I say, Jaime, do me a favor. I was in the middle of learning with someone at the time. I remember this was like 10 and 9 in the morning. I said, do me a favor, Jaime, call Miguel Angel. Tell him they're not letting this shchitin to do the shchit in his slaughterhouse. You're going to stop your kosher shchit here in Costa Rica. How can we do that? He says, give me a minute. He calls up Miguel Angel. 2 minutes later, he comes back and says, that's all taken care of. And the shaykhid calls me in, he's in already. This Miguel Angel called up, he said, what? You're going to stop Jewish slaughtering in my plant? Over my dead body. These were Spanish, these were the words that he used. And it was interesting that when he was president, I mentioned before that there's Darren Blum, the ambassador, he convinced the American Jewish Committee to come here and do their annual convention. But before that, he actually brought what is known in the US as the Conference of Presidents of Jewish Organizations of the United States and Canada. This is I'm sure many of you are aware of this organization. This is an umbrella organization for the Jewish organization. It's like all of the important Jewish organizations, whether it's the American Jewish Committee, the American Jewish Candidates, the UJA, the Joint Distribution, the B'nai Brit, all of these organizations, the presidents of these organizations sit in this conference, which is called the Conference of Presidents. It's like an umbrella organization for all of the organizations, American organizations. At the time, Ron Lauder was the president of the Conference of Presidents, and Jaime requested from them the same thing. They should come to visit Costa Rica, to visit the president, and thank him for the support that they gave, and that they did it. So they all flew in on Ron Lauder's, from Estee Lauder, Ron Lauder's plane, and we had a beautiful, and the president and Miguel Angel gave a dinner for a small group of people. There was these 6 that came, and it was the ambassador himself, Darren Blum, was the minister. He had 25% of his cabinet was Jewish. 25% of the cabinet was Jewish at the time. I was there, we had a fully kosher event, and there was about 15 people around the table. And it was very interesting because it was a very, very, very intimate group, people that very influential in the world. Ron Lauder, he was telling of the whole story. He was very close to Benjamin Netanyahu, and he was telling it. It was a very interesting event in any case. And I got up there in front of these dignitaries of the Jewish community, and I publicly thanked Miguel Angel at the time for him standing up for Shechita and in general, and not allowing that the anti-Semites should be able to raise their heads in Costa Rica. And he was very thankful, very proud. And he said, yes, tell them. And it was a very interesting event. In any case, I would like to conclude, I'm not sure how much time I have, but I would like to conclude by saying that, just saying that I first of all, I want to thank the rabbi for giving this opportunity to be here with you and to share some of the events here in Costa Rica. But I just want to say Costa Rica, as you know, is a very small country. I'm sure some of you know this is a tiny country, just a few million people live here. But the influence of Judaism, how we come to these little towns and to make such a tremendous change, just to be able to bring and elevate and bring the soul of Judaism into a community like this. This is something which I'm sure you've heard from rabbis in the past. This is something that the Lubavitcher Rebbe has done all around the world after the Holocaust, to bring Judaism to these small little towns and to large cities and small towns. In Chicago, you have had Judaism throughout. I knew very well Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Hecht, I'm not sure if any of you knew him. He was one of the original Rabbi Herschel Schusterman, Harry Schusterman of the B'nai Ruve Synagogue, and other rabbis that you had that's going back to the 30s and the 40s already, 30s and 40s. But nevertheless, but in the big cities and in the small cities, the Rebbe has taken it upon himself to revive the Jewish world, to revive Judaism in the Jewish world after the Holocaust, to give back. I want to conclude with a story that I heard of a colleague in Australia, Melbourne, Australia, that his father was a Jew, a Holocaust survivor. He became a multi-billionaire, very wealthy Jew. And he ran away to Australia because he wanted to run away as far as possible from Jews after the Holocaust. He became angry at God and at the whole thing. And he wanted to run away. And he went to Australia. How much further could you have gone then than Australia? And lo and behold, his son decides that he wants to go study in Lubavitch Yeshiva in Melbourne, Australia. And he became a fully Chabad chassid. His father was devastated. He was the older son. He had one more brother, and his younger brother followed him. Here is this father. He's losing both of his sons to Judaism. He ran away from it with tremendous anger and hurt and pain after the Holocaust, what he went through and what he saw. He himself came from a very Hasidic home in Hungary. But he was so angry and so hurt and all that pain, and he just wanted to run away. And here, both of his sons are coming to Judaism. So he decided this was too painful for him. And he took a trip to New York from Australia. And he said he's going to come to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and demand from him that he should give him back his children. He should demand that they should throw his children out of the yeshiva and they should give back his children. So he comes into the Rebbe's office. For Yechidus, he got a private audience with the Rebbe. And the first thing he comes in, and the Rebbe starts speaking to him, asking him where he's from. And he starts asking him what he went through in the war. And the Rebbe stood up and walked around his desk and put his hand around the shoulder of this Jew, of this survivor. And he says the empathy that the Rebbe showed him and the care and the love, when he was telling his stories, the Rebbe was crying. And he did not carry out. He started telling the Rebbe about his childhood and about the shtetl and about how he grew up. He obviously did not anymore share with the Rebbe his original intention that he came for, but on the contrary. And he told a story that he once met with Menachem Begin. He was a great supporter of Menachem Begin financially, and he once met with him for lunch in Paris. And he asked Menachem Begin, who is the greatest leader of the Jewish people of our times? And he says Menachem Begin told him, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he asked him why. He says, because he made the Jews believe in themselves again. This is something which I experienced here in Costa Rica, in a little country. This is something which, thank God, today it has been spread around the world. Judaism, community after community, has been revived. Jews started believing in themselves again. There's much more to tell, but there's not enough time. And therefore, I just wanted to thank God in front of this beautiful community of Chicago that I had an opportunity to play a little part in that revival. And with that, I will open the floor for questions if anyone has any.
Wow, Rabbi Schwalter, I think we are all just overwhelmed with all that information you gave us and that amazing history and the insight and the inspiration. I had a lot of questions as you were speaking, but as you continued speaking, you just answered them one after one. So I'm left with almost no questions. I'm going to open it up to the floor. If anyone has a question, you can press unmute on your computer, or if you're on the phone, you can press star and then 6 and unmute yourself and just jump in and ask your question.
Kol hakavod, Rabbi. Is there any way you could show us any pictures of your buildings there? You don't have a picture of the menorah in the park, but anything else you could show us? Or you can't come here on your phone?
I'm sorry, I really don't. I don't know. I have a white beard. I'm not at all technical. I'm sure you guys are much older than me, and nevertheless, you may know more than me about that. But in this minute, I don't have it, but I could send some to the rabbi. Maybe I don't know how this works. This group how it works. Maybe we could send some later. There's interesting stories. No, we ran out of time, but we're just in the midst
No,
of
it didn't.
we're just in the midst of going to be building a big Chabad center in a new Chabad center, and so it's a story of itself. It's a miraculous story of itself, but we don't have the time for that. I imagine I'll leave.
We have time because we started late. It's only 3:26, so we have at least another 10 minutes, right, Rabbi Dabrowski, right, to hear the story.
Well, let's see if there are any other questions first.
Well,
Yes,
maybe what we can do is see if there are more questions, and then when it's over, those that want which to stay on, I could share the story.
Okay.
Okay.
I was interested in the kosher hotel and kosher restaurant. Can you send some information to Chicago Mitzvah Campaign?
Are you planning a visit there?
Maybe someday.
Okay.
I mean, not in the near future.
Of course. You could probably go onto our webpage and find it there. It must be there. I never go onto our webpage because I have somebody running it. I wouldn't know how to do it. But I do believe that we have a tourist section on our webpage. If you go in there and find all that information, chabadcostarica.com. But if not, you could definitely send me an email and I will share all the information if there's.
Okay, thank you.
Now we could hear about your new center, please.
Are there any other questions? On the website, it says there's a place called Super Kosher,
Correct.
and I think that I'm not sure if there's any.
There is a place called Super Kosher, which they have it's a kosher supermarket, and they also prepare takeout food.
Sababa.
Sababa, correct. So that was a restaurant. Actually, right now the restaurant is not functioning because of COVID, but pretty soon they're going to start up. But they do have kosher service, food service, so you can take out. There's another place called Kosher Center. That's not on our Ashkach. I'm not sure if it's on the webpage.
I don't see it.
So that's another place where you could also get kosher food. And Shabbos hospitality, you could always call Chabad for that.
It sounds like with a Jewish population that's so small, it's just amazing how involved and active and vibrant the community is.
It is true.
Very unique thing.
That's very true. That's thanks to the original community that came, I must say, originally that they held on to their Jewish values. They held on to the tradition, although they didn't open a kind of school which would teach much of Torah and to be able to observe it. But that's when we came. That's when they ever sent us here to be able to give that part and make sure that the community will continue growing and growing. You know.
And what was the name of the chassan that held the community together and stopped intermarriage and performed chassanas? What was his name?
His name was Herschel Reifer.
Reifer?
Reifer, yes.
Lovely.
So, Rabbi Schmalter, if you wanted to share the story,
Okay.
the time is it's up to you. Whatever you want to do is fine.
Be happy to do so. Sure. It was we bought a property about it was probably 15 years ago. We bought a property with the intention to build a Chabad center there in the future, and. It was in a neighborhood which Jews living there. It was a very central neighborhood. We ourselves were not in that neighborhood at the time, but I saw the future that's really where we would eventually want to build a Chabad center. So I bought a property there. Intention wasn't to build immediately, but a few years, but we got a good it was a good property, very good property. And it was about 52,000 square feet in the city. And it was, we got it for a pretty reasonable price. And I said, you know what, I want to build there. So we bought the property at the time. I got a call about 8 years ago from the largest developers in the country. They own a very important bank here called Bank for America. And they built the most prestigious, the best projects in the country this company builds. And I got a call from the bank that the owner wants to visit me, wants to meet with me. I said, about what? Well, we have a property, that we're building now, Avenida Escazú, which is this new development that is very close to your property, and he wants to purchase your property. I said, it's really not for sale. It's for, we're going to be building a Jewish center, a Jewish community center. He says, well, we would like to meet with you. Would you be willing to meet? I said, sure. So he came to my Chabad, he came to my office. And I had somebody, also another developer from the Jewish community, somebody which was close to me. I asked him to join me at this meeting. So, I don't know, I'm not a negotiator in real estate, but I wanted him to be there just to have somebody there with me. And this was actually a person who this banker knew very well, and he had some business dealings with him, and they respected him very much. We sat down, and he tells us the great project that he has for the call Avenida Escazú, and he wanted to hear what we're doing. I told him we're planning to build a Jewish community center. He says, he's not a Jewish guy. He says, I would be very happy if you could include your Jewish center in our development. I would like to have the Jewish center in our development. This development was a mixture of business, offices, and housing and business. There's a whole center. It was the top place, and it was a beautiful place today in Costa Rica. When one person wants to go take a walk or go visit a pleasant place, this is where they go to. It was just developing them. So he says, I said, what are you referring to? How would you make an offer? And that's what it was. He said he would. And that was it. I never heard from him again. This is 8 years ago. 4 years ago, I was sitting with I put together a building committee because we were about to start our project at the time. So we had a building committee of builders and philanthropists and I've mentioned Louis Lieberman, who was the vice president of the country. He was on that board, on this committee. We had some philanthropists in the country that they were on this committee, and we were starting to speak about the building that we wanted to build. And we needed obviously a large amount to finance it. And one of the people said, didn't John Kitt, the owner of this bank, didn't he approach you a few years ago? I said, yes, he did. Maybe he's still interested. It's okay, we could call him. So one of the people on the committee called him, and he said he'd be very interested. In any case, we started meeting. And at the end of the year, it was a tough negotiation, but at the end of the year, we made a deal. And where he was going to buy off our property for exchange to build us a Chabad center within his beautiful development. It's one of the most protected, secure, and nicest developments today in the country. And it's very right on the side of where Chabad was at the time, and where we were gonna build, and where many Jews live. It's an incredible place. And we made a deal. We struck a deal, and he was not so much interested in the business part of it. It is not a business for him at all. And I would just describe to you the deal that we got. For him, it's not a business. I was actually sitting once with his chief executives of his company. Once I was sitting alone with them once. And they say, you understand, Rabbi, that this is not a business deal for us. I mean, this really is not at all, for us, we have no, but we all understand that every person has a spiritual side to them. And you became Don John's spiritual side. And therefore he wants your synagogue in our development. For him, this became a very important thing. It was miraculous because, this is a deal of millions of dollars. Multi-millions of dollars. And he's just basically giving it us for close to nothing. But I turned around to him right at the beginning of the negotiation and said, it's very nice, but how long is it going to take you to build this? So he said, it's going to take us about 4 years. I said, I'm sorry, I can't wait 4 years. I had moved from the original Chabad into this new neighborhood where I was going to build to start activities there and to start a shul there. We were in a house, a nice house, but it was still a house. It was too small, like we couldn't move. We had to move out of there quickly. I said, I can't wait 4 years. I need a building. So he turns around to the person that he had with him. He says, where is there a place today that we could build for them a synagogue quickly in one of our developments, for the meantime, a temporary place? And so he shows us right next to, was a development that was going up right next to the bank where we were sitting at the time. A beautiful development. And which was very close, which is a couple of blocks away where from Chabad was at the time. So the banker walks with us. I was there with this building committee, my building committee, and we walk to this place and he shows me this beautiful development. He says, would this place work for you? He shows us this large area and this beautiful protected new center, a commercial center, which also offices, stores, restaurants, housing, like a whole development also. Would this work for you? I said, yes, it would. How quick could you have this up? He tells me that I could build that for you. You could have it up in a few months. You could in a few months, you could. I mean, the building was there, the shell was there. He just had to do internal renovations. So he did the full internal renovations for Chabad. He paid for it, all of it. We have a beautiful center today where people don't understand why we're moving. They don't understand that it's not mine. It's just part of the whole deal. He paid for it. This is an $18,000 a month rent. He doesn't charge us one nickel for it. It's all his. This is how interested he was in having us in this. It's a miracle. This is miracles from Hashem because of this non-Jew having such tremendous interest in having the Jewish community in his development. So just a little anecdote, a little story. We can go on for days and days.
What happens to that building? What happens to that building when you move into the new place?
It's his. It belongs to him. He'll do something else with it. It's not, it's not a problem. It's just he could do store, whatever, they'll rent it or sell it to anyone that wants to buy it. It's a very, very expensive place. It's a very, very prestigious place. The day we move out, people will move in. It's no problem. He could split it up. He could divide it into different things. So I could show you. I mean, if you want to wait a minute, I could just give you a little tour of this place. This is my office. I'm sitting at my office. I don't know what you can't see anything. I have to turn this around, right?
Yes.
That's how technically, how do I do this? Oh boy.
Well, you could just physically turn the phone around.
Oh yeah, I could do that. Okay. I just won't see what I'm showing you. That's a little problem.
Right.
This is just like some offices. This is a conference room. Office for another rabbi. Take you to the shul mainly, which I want to show you. We have a couple of kitchens. This is the meat kitchen for the events that we have here. And this is a bakery that we have. This is a little bakery. This is the main entrance to the building. Could you see anything?
See everything, yes.
Okay, so this is the main entrance. This is a little foyer. It's a temporary place, but this is the service area. This area really, today you see tables here and chairs as part of the shul. Really, this is like a little, we make over here the kiddushes and bar mitzvahs and brises. And this, as you see, these doors, there is a sliding doors, that walls that they close. Well, here we have the mechitza now. And this is the shul. This is the shul. So usually this mechitza that you see here is really in the center of the shul, men and women, besides Rosh Hashanah Kippur, where we have the women on this side, where the kiddush area is usually. Because of COVID, we had to space a lot and we had to distance a lot. So we just made this side the men's shul, and over there we made the women's shuls. On the other side, we used the kiddushes. This is the shul, and just a little tour of this place. So that's what we have today as a temporary place, which they built for us. And they're in about a half a year, they're going to be starting. We're here close to 3 years. The COVID held it back for an extra year, the actual development of the new center. But within about a half a year, they're going to be starting to build that. And in a year and a half, we should be in there. Looks
beautiful.
That's the story of Chabad of Costa Rica. Somebody asked me before, they wanted to see pictures of our place. So I showed it. We don't have our school in this building. It's too small. But in the new center, our school is going to be there also. And everything will be there.
Wonderful, really wonderful.
Marty,
Well,
kol hakavod.
I'm sorry, did somebody ask something?
I said kol hakavod and Mardik.
Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure to be with you.
I want to thank you so much again. And we don't want to take up too much of your time, but it was a real pleasure. And I want to wish you a lot of bracha and hatzlacha, success in all of your fantastic initiatives and endeavors and working with the Jews of Costa Rica, and only continued success.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. And the same to you.
Amen.
Thank you. Amen. Amen. Okay, everybody, we're going to end the meeting here. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, everyone, stay well and stay warm out there in the cold. And we'll see you next time, God willing, in good health. Take
Amen.
care.
Amen. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.